Discs are tight today, and the birds fly low. We'll have frost by morning. I see it now.
Nah. For the Amish, the day begins before dawn. It is a life defined by the rhythms of the earth and the strength of the community.
Good morning, Levi. Cold out today. It is, Jacob. Ready to get started.
Easy.
And full? These here are small.
Nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee, e'en though it be, Lord, through the gathering storm, fields and scatter the good seed on the land. But it is me, fast falls the eventide, the dark
Winter back in '58, the snow didn't get this high until March.
Yeah, but the freeze of '72, that one took nearly all the young.
That was the year the wolves came down from the ridge. We barred the doors tight and prayed for morning light. About the winter of '04, the snow was so deep, deeper than we've. The warmth of this fire reminds us of the warmth in our hearts for the traditions handed down through the generations.
Earlier than expected.
Yeah, but the work is finished for the day.